We're coming to the end of Erin Patterson's triple murder trial. She's been charged with the murders of Don and Gail Patterson, the murder of Heather Wilkinson, and the attempted murder of Ian Wilkinson. And those charges relate to a beef Wellington lunch she served at her house in July 2023. Erin Patterson's pleaded not guilty to all charges. Now, the prosecution has been calling witnesses that they say will help the jury come to the conclusion that she murdered her lunch guests, that she poisoned them with criminal intent, and that when they ate food at her house in Leongatha that day, Erin Patterson put deathcap mushrooms in their beef Wellingtons because she meant to kill them. The last prosecution witness in the case is Detective Leading Senior Constable Simon Eppingstall. So he's the police informant or the officer in charge of the investigation. As part of Eppingstall's evidence, we've seen Erin Patterson's 21-minute interview with police that was done a week after the lunch. Erin Patterson's obviously been sitting in court for the entire 5 weeks of this trial, but when her police interview was played, her voice is echoing through the court. That's the first time we've actually heard her during this entire process, and we're able to watch as she spoke to police for the first time about the lunch. She spoke about how much she loved Don and Gail, and that's why she invited them over there, that she wanted to have them in her lives, even though her and Simon are separated, and she actually said that no matter what Simon did to hurt her, she was always going to love Don and Gail. And it basically gave a real sort of sense, I suppose, of something beyond what we'd heard in other evidence so far about who Erin Patterson actually is. So the mushroom experts that we've heard from have basically talked about the difficulty in identifying deathcap mushrooms as opposed to edible forms of mushrooms. They've also talked about what they said was a citizen science website, iNaturalist, where people can upload posts with very specific details about location, where they've spotted certain mushrooms. And the reason for this is the prosecution have said earlier in their case that there's evidence which suggests that Erin Patterson visited locations where deathcap mushrooms had been cited and posted on iNaturalist. There was also extensive evidence heard from Dr. Matthew Sorrell. Now, he's an expert in cell phone towers and triangulating those and the analysis of what that data means. Now, the reason the prosecution called Dr. Sorrell is because they are trying to establish that Erin Patterson's phone data suggests she was at certain points at certain periods of time in which she could have picked deathcap mushrooms. Lock and also the town of Outram, which are quite close to her home. The defence say that the phone data does nothing more than basically sort of outline that she was in those areas, which is not uncommon for her given she lives so close by. And speaking of phones, exactly a week after lunch, police went to her house. They executed a warrant, seized multiple devices, but one device that police say they have never found, they call phone A. Erin Patterson did hand over a phone during that search, but that was a phone they've called phone B that they say wasn't her actual main phone of use at the time of the lunch. That phone that Erin Patterson did hand over to police, they later found when they did an electronic analysis of that phone that there had actually been multiple factory resets of it done, including one when it was in the custody of police officers after they'd actually seized it during that search. There was also a lot of evidence heard about the data extractions from those electronic devices and what police said those extractions showed up. So that included text message exchanges, signal chat message exchanges. There's been dozens of messages that have been read into evidence during the trial so far. They're messages from Erin to her estranged husband, Simon. They're messages between Erin and her other lunch guests. And amongst this whole tranche of messages was a series of messages exchanged between Erin and Gail Patterson, where Erin's talking about what she says is a series of medical tests she's getting. Now, that touches on something the prosecution mentioned in their opening to the case, which is that Erin had invited her lunch guests to her house on the pretense that she had cancer. Those messages referred to biopsies and appointments at St. Vincent's, and the police say there's no record that those appointments or those biopsies occurred. And so over the course of the past 5 weeks, we've had the prosecution introducing a series of messages between Erin and Simon, and Erin and her in-laws, but also Erin and her Facebook friends that they say go into some of the relationship, I suppose, she had with those people at that time. So some of the messages the prosecution have introduced into evidence include Patterson saying she's sick of her family, fuck them, and basically expressing her frustration about how things are going with Simon and her in-laws. But the defence have brought in messages as part of that same conversation that they say provide a greater context and show that this was a series of friends venting to each other about frustrations in their own lives, that Erin's friends were similarly saying things about their own in-laws, and that gave a greater context to those message exchanges. We're about to go into the 6th week of this trial. Eppingstall will finish his evidence. The defence will then get a chance to call their own witnesses before the judge gives directions to the jury, and the jury will retire to deliberate.